And for our opening prayer this morning, this spoke to me, and so I'm praying it first person singular, but it's intended plural, and I offer it as a prayer that perhaps we all need currently. Let us pray. O Lord, teach me the meaning of your commandment to love our enemies and help me to obey it. Make me the instrument that should be of your love, which is not denied to the hungry, the sick, the prisoner, the enemy. Teach me to hate division and not seek after it. But teach me also to stand up for those things I believe to be right, no matter what the consequences may be. And help me this day to do some work of peace for you, perhaps to one I had thought to be my enemy. Amen.
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 Still not reply.
Let me.
I emailed them and said I would like to know where they read it.
Good.
Okay.
That
So
I can't.
today, I thought we might go back and look just at the end of Job 15 again because we kind of not rushed, but we did move more quickly through those passages than we had the previous chapter. And I think it sets us up for Job's response to Eliphaz. So, the questions I put out for us to think about as we move through Job 16 and into 17, maybe, um, is what do we say when someone is suffering? Are we like Job's comforters? And Job will use that word of his three friends today, or do we do better than they do? So those are just some hypothetical questions, rhetorical questions for us to hold in the back of our mind. All right. So, Kim, have you read Job before?
I have not. I don't believe. If I have, it would be a long time ago.
Would someone like to give a quick thumbnail summary of Job so far and what's going on?
Sure.
I thought you might, Fred. Excellent. Thank you.
Well, we got to keep things moving. Job is a man without fault. God is chewing the fat with his angels when Satan comes in. And Satan is the accuser, like the inspector general, perhaps would be a better, and says, sure. And God, picks out Job and says, look how good he is. And Satan's response is, well, he's good because you've been good to him. If you take that away, he will curse you. So first they kill all his children and steal all his goods. He still maintains a somewhat philosophical attitude. Then Satan covers him with boils.
Gotta love
And
the boils.
Love the boils.
yeah, boils are a great, I don't know. And finally, Job has three comforters, three friends who come by to comfort him. And they sit for 7 days in silence and then finally start talking. And they all agree that everything that happens is God's will. This cannot be an accident. This cannot be that somebody wasn't paying attention. It can't be random chance. Everything that happens is God's will. The three comforters blame it all on Job. They don't know where he screwed up or how he screwed up, but it's his own fault. And Job denies that. He says, he tried to do everything right. And, if God has a beef with him, God should come down and tell him directly. And they are passing this idea back and forth. All four of them agree that, God is responsible for this, but his comforters say he deserved it. And Job is of the, you just got to tell me what I did.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone want to add anything to that? That was a good overview. So I'll just say that the structure of Job, the beginning of the book and the end of the book are prose, and they're sort of narrative explanations of what's going on. But then each of these chapters tends to be a speech by either
Mhm.
Job or one of his friends, with
Mhm.
friends, you know. Um, so we've talked before about how you could almost see this dramatized on stage, as a series of
Mhm.
monologues. And so
Mhm.
what we've been doing is that we've had one person read a whole speech so that we can hear it without interruption, and then we kind of
Right.
analyze
Okay.
it. So that's where we are. So
Well, thank you.
sure, sure, sure. It's hard to jump in the middle of a conversation. So we like to bring people up to speed. So last week we talked about, we read together chapter 15, and this is Eliphaz the Temanite. And he's, as Fred said, he's one of his comforters who blames Job and, keeps saying, well, you must have done something. Um, and I just thought we could revisit um, this last part. Um, except, let's see this. Okay. I'm just going to read 17 to the end just to refresh our minds. And if we need to say anything more about it, we can. And then we'll start with 16 because Job is rebutting or responding to what Eliphaz says here. I will show you, listen to me. What I have seen, I will declare. What sages have told and their ancestors have not hidden, to whom alone the land was given and no stranger passed among them. The wicked writhe in pain all their days, through all the years that are laid up for the ruthless. Terrifying sounds are in their ears. In prosperity, the destroyer will come upon them. They despair of returning from darkness, and they are destined for the sword. They wander abroad for bread, saying, where is it? They know that a day of darkness is ready at hand. Distress and anguish terrify them. They prevail against them like a king prepared for battle. Because they stretched out their hands against God and bid defiance to the Almighty, running stubbornly against him with a thickly bossed shield, because they have covered their faces with their fat and gathered fat upon their loins, they will live in desolate cities, in houses that no one should inhabit, houses destined to become heaps of ruins. They will not be rich, and their wealth will not endure, nor will they strike root in the earth. They will not escape from darkness. The flame will dry up their shoots, and their blossom will be swept away by the wind. Let them not trust in emptiness, deceiving themselves, for emptiness will be their recompense. It will be paid in full before their time, and their branch will not be green. They will shake off their unripe grape like the vine, and cast off their blossoms like the olive tree. For the company of the godless is barren, and fire consumes the tents of bribery. They conceive mischief and bring forth evil, and their belly prepares deceit. Did anyone want to say anything further about that? We talked about it last week. Okay. Well, then let's move on. We'll just keep Eliphaz's lovely speech in our heads as we move on to Job's answer in chapter 16. Would someone like to read 16? It's 22 verses, it's not so long.
I'll do that.
Thank you, Ray.
Then Job answered, I have heard such things before, you who make trouble, all of you, with every breath, saying, when will this windbag have done? This is the New English
I
translation.
love it. I love it.
What makes him so stubborn in argument? If you and I were to change places, I could talk like you. How I could harangue you and wag my head at you. But no, I would speak words of encouragement, and then my condolences would flow in streams.
Hmm.
If I speak, my pain is not eased. If I am silent, it does not leave me. Meanwhile, my friend wearies me with false sympathy. Thoughts and prayers, folks. They, they tear me to pieces, he and his fellows. He has come forward to give evidence against me. The liar testifies against me to my face. In his wrath, he wears me down. His hatred is plain to see. He grinds his teeth at me. My enemies look daggers at me. They bare their teeth to rend me. They slash my cheeks with knives. They are all in league against me. God has left me at the mercy of malefactors and cast me into the clutches of wicked men. I was at ease, but he set upon me and mauled me and seized me by the neck and worried me. He set me up as his target. His arrows rained upon me from every side. Pitiless, he cut deep into my vitals. He split my gall on the ground, spilt my gall on the ground. He made breach after breach in my defenses. He fell upon me like a fighting man. I stitched sackcloth together to cover my body, and I buried my forelock in the dust. My cheeks were flushed with weeping, and dark shadows were round my eyes. Yet my hands were free from violence, and my prayer was sincere. O earth, cover not my blood, and let my cry for justice find no rest. For look, my witness is in heaven. There is one on high, ready to answer for me. My appeal will come before God when my eyes turn again and again to him. If only there were one to arbitrate between man and God, as between a man and his neighbor. There are but few years to come before I take the road from which I shall not return.
Thank you. Great reading. And one of the things, Kim, we've been talking about is Job in particular is a great book to read in different translations.
Mhm,
Because the Hebrew tends to be kind of complicated, and there are some words that only appear in Job, and so there are a lot of
mhm.
ways they get translated. So the fun part has been comparing, what I have on the
Right.
screen is the New Revised Standard, and
Okay.
Fred reads the New International, Ray reads the New English, and so we've got lots of different translations going, which is really cool. So, having said that, what's your pleasure, everybody? Let's see if I can just get rid of this guy. Yes. Where do you want to start? Or are there places where your translation or the translation on the screen differed from Ray's and you thought that was interesting? Where should we go?
I'm kind of reminded that, of the saying that when a woman vents, she just wants you to listen. And when you vent to a man, he wants to fix things. And Job's comforters are trying to fix things
Hmm.
that are beyond fixing. He realizes no one is going to that they can't take away his pain. He would just like them to, sort of say they're there, it's unfair or whatever. Life will get better.
Yeah, it sounds like he just wants someone on his side, alongside him, to stand with him, as opposed to pointing the finger at him constantly.
I think
Yeah.
at verse 5, and he says what he wants and as what he would give. I mean, he
Mm-hmm.
presents the way he would handle it,
Mm-hmm.
which it takes a lifetime to learn.
Mm-hmm. It sure does. Ray, could you read your verse 7 again? I think it was 7.
Okay,
Mind?
just let me find it here. Meanwhile, my friend wearies me with false sympathy. They, they tear me to pieces, he and his fellows. He has come forward to give evidence against me. Do you want me to keep going?
I think that's okay. The reason I ask is the translation on the screen, the New Revised says, "Surely God has worn me out." And so I think we need to look at that in the Hebrew.
Yeah, I don't know why. Yeah, that's a huge difference.
Let's see. I think the question is one of antecedent. So I'm just going to read the English here. This is the New American Standard. Job answered, I have heard many such things. Sorry, comforters, are you all? Wow, I hope no one ever says that to me. Is there no limit to windy words or what plagues that you answer? I too could speak like you if I were in your place. I could compose words against you and shake my head at you. I could strengthen you with my mouth, and the solace of my lips could lessen your pain. If I speak, my pain is not lessened, and if I hold back what is left me. But now he has exhausted me. You have laid waste all my company. But the problem is we don't get the, it's not hyperlinked here for the he. This translation capitalizes it, which implies God, of course.
Yeah, and
Um,
here it is simply
yeah,
my friend.
but it's very vague. Um, does anybody else, hmm, does anybody else have a different translation for verse 7?
I've got the New International, and it's saying, surely, O God, you have worn me out. You have devastated my entire household.
Okay.
You have bound me, and it has become a witness. My gauntness rises up and testifies against me. I'm not sure how that, and then it's back to the third person. God assails me and tears me in his
Hmm.
anger.
Hmm. That's just really interesting to me. Does anyone have anything different still? So it's really fascinating. So who is doing the wearing out? Is it God or is it Job's friends or is it both? Um, because I just think it's very cool that Ray's translation renders it differently.
Yeah, my
Vastly different.
translation is very clear. Surely, comma, God, comma, you have worn me out.
Hmm. Yeah, and see, I
Yeah,
think that the issue is, again, this is one of those places where the Hebrew is not at all clear. Um, yeah, because I suspect that if it said Yahweh or Adonai here in the Hebrew, it would give us that, but it just, it's just a pronoun. So that's what's hard. Ray, were you going to say something?
I'm just looking at my study Bible here. John, do you have your study Bible?
Don't, Ray, I do not.
Okay, let me see. It'll take me a minute to find it in this thing.
I'm
It's
going to look
got
in
feathers in every chapter, but it
in
takes me a while to get
mine
there.
as well. Well, while Ray and I are thumbing through our Bibles, what else do you hear here that you want to pursue? Let's see.
I think what's unclear to me is in all these translations, is it God that is doing all the shriveling and gnashing and um, death and dismemberment, or is it evil men,
Mm-hmm.
by which you could possibly even read Eliphaz?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, to kind of piggyback on what you're saying, Ellie, I mean, in verse 11, it says, God gives me up to the ungodly and casts me into the hand of the wicked. And then when I look at verse 19, he's saying, even now, in fact, my witness is in heaven, and he that vouches for me is on high, which seems like a contradiction.
Mm-hmm.
So is God throwing him into the hands of the wicked? And but at the same time, I mean, this seems so contradictory to me. 11 and 19.
Yeah.
Yeah.
12 and 13 says, all is well with me, but he shattered me. He seized me by the neck and crushed me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and then, yeah, then, oh, wait, who, if I'm getting crushed by this person, how can he be my advocate on high?
So my question, and I don't have the answer to it, is that advocate on high meant to be God, or is there some other mediator between Job and God? And by that I do not mean Jesus. But I'm wondering how Job is understanding it. Obviously I don't know. But that if the advocate isn't God, then that would make more sense according to what, Donna and Ellie are pointing out here, that tension, or that conflict.
I'm back to 7. I find one thin footnote. It says, and I'm reading now from one of the Revised Standard ones, the Study Bible. Surely now God has worn me out. Thou hast made desolate all my company. It says the Hebrew renders thou hast. So it's
Mhm.
directed at a you.
Yeah, mine says you have.
Yeah, and there's a footnote here that says, yeah, the Hebrew is you have, and then, yeah, for both 7 and 8. So it's the second person. It's, accusatory against God. Um, okay. So I'm curious about that advocate piece. Let me look at the Hebrew there. 19. Even now, behold, my witness is in heaven. So,
My book has a note, which says that his witness is his innocence.
oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Mine says Job's witness, already in God's presence, is thought to be sufficiently powerful to exact justice from the deity. Doesn't really help. In 933, Job dismissed any such possibility of a mediator between himself and God. Hmm.
If we seem to be automatically personifying witness
Hmm.
as a person rather than as a verb. What I have done is my witness. Gone to witnessing, I think, is the phrase in the Pentecostal vocabulary.
Hmm.
So my deeds witness me could be.
So his witness is his record, right? His, what he has done, um, or what he has not done.
And even now my witness is in heaven, my blah, 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 blah. My friends scorn me, my eye pours out tears to God. And this one, my intercessor is my friend, as my eyes pour out tears to God.
Hmm.
So there's no, and where does the intercessor come from?
Hmm. So I think Ray's onto something here, that Job's witness isn't another character, another being. It's, you know, my actions speak for themselves. My witness is in heaven. Um, Although he does say my advocate is on high, which does make it sound like there's another being. Um, my translation in my study Bible for 19 says, even now, in fact, my witness is in heaven, and he that vouches for me is on high. Um, that
Was
doesn't,
the other direction.
yeah.
It's like he's putting his faith in God, even as he's saying that God has, is being unjust to him.
And there's a real conflict there.
There's
Okay.
he
Go ahead.
has no other explanation for what's happened other than the fact that God has, smote him. So, he has there's that tension.
So here's an interesting thing. So in verse 19, my witness is in heaven and my advocate is on high. The Hebrew verb for advocate, this is one of those, here's our fancy term, hapax legomenon. It's a word that only appears here in Job, just this one time in the book. And here it's translating it as witness or record. So it's interesting that the English translation, and it is a different Hebrew word from the word for witness earlier in that same sentence. So,
I think that's all consistent with what Ray was saying, that it's my body of work, everything I have done, my life, it testifies for me.
I think you're right. It's like here's my portfolio, right?
Yeah.
I'm laying this out. This is who I am. Um, yeah, yeah. That makes more sense to me than an intermediary. Donna, were you going to say something?
No, I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry. Um, okay. My friends scorn me, my eye pours out tears to God, that he would maintain the right of a mortal with God as one does for a neighbor. What about this image of I have sewed sackcloth upon my skin and have laid my strength in the dust? What does sackcloth bring up for us?
Sackcloth and ashes,
Yeah.
Morning.
Morning.
repentance, mourning.
Yeah. Anything else? So when Job is taking on, Eliphaz and the others as windbags, um, it really does raise that question that I asked before, which is, how do we respond when someone is suffering? Um, and maybe we don't have to answer that, or maybe it's worth looking at. I mean, the human impulse seems to be to Fred's point to try to fix things, right? And I will say that when I was training for ordination, everyone who is going to be ordained has to take at least a summer of clinical pastoral education. And generally that is done in a hospital, although sometimes it's in a different setting. But I served mine at Children's Hospital, downtown DC. And everyone who goes, and it's a brilliant educational design because everyone who goes into that program begins with, what am I going to say? I have to have the answer. How can I talk? Again, I was at Children's Hospital. So how can I, comfort this mother whose child is dying? Um, and the hardest thing in clinical pastoral education is coming up to that, that canyon, that cavern, and saying, there's absolutely not a thing that I can say. I cannot make this better. And I can stand with this person. I can sit with this person. I can be present to this person. And sometimes that's enough. Um, but that's so difficult because, we want to have the magic words.
Well, we know that Job thinks that he would be comforted from the right words
Mm-hmm.
because he says, I could assuage your pain if I was the comforter. I have the words.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what those words are, but I wish I knew what they were.
Mm-hmm.
But he feels that words would be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's just words of saying, we believe you, we believe in you, or,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, words of encouragement, and then my condolences would flow in streams.
Mm-hmm.
No assurance of fixing it. It would be empathy.
Mm-hmm. And empathy, of course, comes from a place of understanding, right? We empathize when we've either been there ourselves in a similar situation, or at least we can imagine that we've been there or are there. Um, it's the failure to empathize that is so problematic. And I would say, you know, plus ça change, thousands of years later, we still are struggling to empathize with one another. And so we talk across each other and, we demonize the other instead of putting ourselves in the other's position. So I just think that's so valuable when Job says that. Yeah, I would have the words because I understand what it's like to go through this. You can't imagine.
Mm-hmm.
They both have the same theology. They both believe that this, that God has done this to Job for a reason.
By both, you mean Job and Eliphaz?
Job and his comforters.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
They agree on the theology. I think what Job would like is, somebody to say, you're right, you do deserve an explanation.
Yeah, and sometimes that's all we need, right? Is just to have somebody say, "You're not crazy, you're not wicked." To your point, you do deserve some kind of explanation, some answer. Thus far, he has not had that soft landing place with anyone.
Or somebody who just says, I understand that you've tried to do everything right.
It's that affirmation.
Yeah, and I don't know why you're being persecuted either. But
But do you have to say something? A friend of mine who's a Methodist minister, and I mentioned to him we were doing Job, and he said he was always struck by the introduction where the three friends sat with him for 7 days and didn't say anything because they saw how much he was in distress.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't the sitting for the 7 days be like a Passover? I mean, a Seder after a death?
Like
Or
Shiva?
Shiva.
yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and there's some deep wisdom in that tradition. And again, just being present, to John's point about not trying to have the canned answer.
But they
And
might be scared to speak. I mean, they might be scared that, the wrath of God would come to them if they spoke. I mean, I think that when we look at, like when we study psychology, they talk about fear is the biggest motivator. What you would do with a gun to your head is completely different than the way you behave if there's not a gun to your head. And rob a bank or this or that, or if you're being held hostage, what you would do is different. And maybe they are in fear, like there's no explanation for it. Are they next? He's led a good life, they've led good lives. How do we prevent this? And they're just kind of like in awe that they're probably terrified.
I like that, Kim, because it sounds to me like they're in denial. From that point of view, they are trying to assure themselves that they aren't going to be next.
Right. They're like, we don't want to align with him. That might make God angry. I don't know. We don't want to say, yeah, this was unfair, because that would be pointing a finger at God, saying, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know.
it reminds me of, the accounts in the Gospels. Again, I'm not interpolating Jesus into the story of Job at all. I'm just because I think most of us are more familiar with the Gospels than we are with Job. It reminds me what you're saying, Kim and Ray, of the early days after the crucifixion, after Jesus's death, and even after the resurrection, when the earliest disciples, the earliest believers are, where are they? They're huddled in the upper room out of fear because, this has happened to someone who is blameless, right? And they could be next. And so it reminds me of that. That's that human feeling, very natural, understandable human feeling of, oh boy, what happened to him could happen to me. Yeah, that was helpful.
Yeah. Well, maybe these comforters are trying to find what happened to him to reassure themselves that it's not about to happen to them.
And maybe in not being too comforting, they walk a line of disassociation with Job, in a sense, like in front of God, that, because they're scared.
They're scared, and I would maybe another metaphor would be that they're kind of doing a test of theory, kind of a scientific inquiry into how this could possibly happen. All of our theories about leading the good life and obeying the rules, all of that seem to be violated here unless Job has done something. So our world comes apart if my theory is wrong, and God operates in some way we don't understand.
Everything we've hung our hope on is moral, right? And I think that's why this book is so brilliant and it's so interesting to talk about, because then we ask the same questions. Well, wait a minute. What if bad things just do happen to good people, which we know they do. But how do we make sense of that? What's our frame of reference, and how does that reality violate this construct that we have?
Well, I think some other faith traditions, have a better handle on it. They start off with the fact that, life is suffering, bad things happen, and it's nobody's fault. It's just something to be endured.
And we are always looking for the causal relationship, right? I bring this up all the time, but it keeps being reminded. I keep being reminded of it, is that story in John's gospel. When people bring a blind man to Jesus and say, "Who sinned, this man or his parents? Why is he blind?" Someone had to have done something wrong that he's born blind, and of course that was a common understanding at that time. But always looking for that causal relationship. If A, then B.
With what Fred just said, this may be a rabbit hole and we don't have to pursue it, but I'm just wondering if other cultures do not pursue things to a causal chain, which seems to be what Fred is pointing to, then that maybe is one of the big drivers of the Judeo-Christian culture, always looking further for an answer and a causal chain. And you can get out into the modern life and scientific revolution and all of that, but that curiosity about cause and effect is enshrined in this.
Whatever it is, there's got to be a reason for it.
Yeah. And if you're out of a different tradition where there doesn't have to be a reason, maybe you don't pursue those things, and maybe it changes the whole way of life.
And indeed, one of the more common phrases in Muslim countries is inshallah.
And on ordination invitations in our tradition.
Yep, God willing and the people consenting. Yep, exactly. Well, it's interesting. I think, I've told you before that my husband was raised in a fundamentalist tradition, and he was brought up that, you didn't ever say anything affirmatively like, "I'm going to do X or Y." It was always prefaced with "God willing," or "if nothing happens." So there was just never that assumption that things were going to go exactly the way one intended or planned, that there was always this variable about, if God allows it to happen.
Language footnote. When I lived in Denmark for a while, and they preserve the difference between will and shall. You can say, "I will do something," but it carries that conditional. And so it may not happen. That's what I want to happen, but it may not. And we've lost that in current English by and large.
We really have. That's true. This is a great conversation. Anything else about this chapter? You want to move on to 17?
Yeah.
Okay. See what comes next. Let me. Okay, here we go. All right. Job prays for relief. Would someone like to read these 16 verses for us?
Oh, sure.
Thank you, Fred.
My spirit is broken. My days are cut short. The grave awaits me. Surely mockers surround me. My eyes must dwell on their hostility. Give me, O God, the pledge you demand. Who else will put up security for me? You have closed their minds to understanding. Therefore, you will not let them triumph. If anyone denounces their friends for reward, the eyes of their children will fail. God has made me a byword to everyone, a man in whose face people spit. My eyes have grown dim with grief. My whole frame is but a shadow. The upright are appalled at this. The innocent are aroused against the ungodly. Nevertheless, the righteous will hold to their ways, and those with clean hands will go stronger. But come on, all of you, try again. I will not find a wise man again among you. My days have passed, my plans are shattered, yet the desires of my heart turn night into day. In the face of darkness, light is near. If the only home I hope for is the grave, if I spread out my bed in the realm of darkness, if I say to corruption, you are my father, and to the worm, my mother or my sister, where then is my hope? Who can see any hope for me? Will it go down to the gates of death? Will we descend together into the dust?
Thank you.
Kind of negative.
Bummer.
We'll be pressed there, Job.
Oh.
He's about to fail his Dale Carnegie course.
Yeah, he's not winning too many friends or influencing people right now. Okay, so what strikes you? What interests you here?
What does he mean in 3? Give
Three.
me, O God, the pledge you demand. Who else will put up security for me?
The translation I'm got in my lap here at the moment is, be thou my surety with thyself. For who else can pledge himself for me?
Hmm.
Direct appeal to God.
Let's see what the Hebrew says.
Yeah, this translation and the one Fred read are, I think, maybe significantly different. There was a lot of variation.
Yeah.
Mhm.
The Hebrew here, lay down now a pledge for me with yourself. Who is there that will be my guarantor? Let's see.
Interesting.
Yeah.
My note says, since no one will guarantee his innocence, he must ask God to accept his own person as his pledge.
Ah,
Huh.
that's clear.
Donna, which translation is that? That was clear.
New Revised Standard, same as the words are the same as this
Okay.
on the screen.
Okay. Yeah. What else strikes you all?
Well, this whole thing, I mean, continuing on to 4, you have closed their mind to understanding, therefore you will not let them triumph.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it sounds like God is taking an active part in, and who are they?
Right. That was my question. Who are they?
But he's taking an active part in, just like he hardened Pharaoh's heart
Mm-hmm.
and then went out and slew his children.
Mm-hmm.
That's always seemed to me to be a little unfair.
I think if you look up in verse 2, mockers surround me. My eyes must dwell on their hostility. Give me, O God, the pledge you demand. Who else will put up security for me? You've closed their minds, the mockers, to understanding. I don't know. This is just kind of garbled.
The one I have here says, thou wilt not let those men triumph, whose minds thou hast sunk in ignorance.
Hmm.
Mhm.
So God sunk them in ignorance and is going to prevent them from triumphing because of that.
Because the mockers.
Yeah, but they're mocking him because God made them.
There's another clause in that sentence here, the way it's packaged here. Thou wilt not let those men triumph, referring to verse 2, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Minds thou hast sunk in ignorance. Out of stupidity, you aren't going to get it. If such a man denounces his friends to their ruin, his son's eyes will grow dim.
Mhm.
throw up my hands. I don't understand it.
Well, are the mockers the comforters? I mean, they're the ones who are around him.
That's what I'm seeing.
I think too. Yeah. Let's see what the Hebrew says. See if it clarifies anything. Mockers. Come on. Come on. It's thinking slowly. All right. Well, that's not going to help me because I can't. All right. Let's try one more time about these mockers. Okay. That's yet another hapax legomenon, a word that only appears once. Translated mocker. Okay. So, yeah, are the mockers the
Whoa.
Hi, Belle. Good morning, Miss Bell. Are the mockers the comforters?
There's not many other members of the cast in this.
Exactly. There are a lot of other candidates, right?
This seems to me like the inverse of nothing succeeds like success. And that they, once he was so high and mighty and had everything. And then once he is down, it's so appalling to them that they need to condemn him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I wonder if anyone can relate to that too.
I'm just finding this whole thing to be almost incoherent.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah, again, it's an antecedent question. Who is the they he's talking about? Who's the he's talking about? We think we know, but the Hebrew's not super clear. He has made me a byword of the peoples, and I am one before whom people spit. It reminds me of Psalm 22. We read Psalm 22 usually on Maundy Thursday as we're stripping the altar. It is Psalm 22 that Jesus quotes from the cross. And of course, it begins, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from helping me from the words of my groaning? I cry by night, by day, but you do not answer, and by night, but found no rest. Deliver my soul from the sword, my life from the power of the dog, save me from the mouth of the lion. I mean, this language of Job reminds me of the psalmist. And he's really wallowing in it, which has a place, right? We all kind of need to be able to wallow sometimes. My eye has grown dim from grief. All my members are like a shadow. The upright are appalled at this, and the innocent stir themselves up against the godless. Yet the righteous hold to their way, and they who have clean hands grow stronger and stronger. What do we make of that? They who have clean hands grow stronger and stronger, yet he's been claiming to have clean hands for 17 chapters, but he's not growing stronger and stronger.
Maybe he is. Maybe he's getting his second wind.
Stay tuned, everybody.
Well, no, I mean, verse 10. But come on, all of you, try again.
I shall not find a sensible person among you.
I will not find a wise man among you. My days have passed, my plans are shattered, yet the desires of my heart turn night into day.
Mm-hmm.
He's
hearing a little
this is
gathering.
He's digging deep and coming back for more.
Mm-hmm.
And this is interesting because generally speaking, Fred's and my translations are very similar, but here the 11 says, my days have passed, my plans are shattered, and so are the desires of my heart. These men turn night into day. In the face of darkness, they say, light is near. If the only hope home I hope for is the grave. Okay, if the only home I hope for is the grave, if I spread out my bed in darkness, if I say to corruption, you are my father, and to the worm, my mother or my sister, where then is my hope?
Hmm.
Who can see any hope for me?
Mm-hmm.
Like I say, I think he's getting his second wind.
Mhm.
He's telling him, are you going to go down to the grave with me? No, then,
Well,
I have to suck it up.
I'm just looking up pit because it's been, I think, Ellie, did the word that I have translated here as pit, I think you had corruption. Was that
mhm,
it?
yes.
So the Hebrew is pit, destruction, grave, pit of hell, pit for catching lions, corruption, ditch. Okay.
But every so often it will have a footnote saying that it means Sheol,
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
but not every time.
Let's see what my study Bible says. Gotta go back to Job. I flipped into. What verse is that? That's 14. Yeah, mine just says the pit with a capital P, which to me implies Sheol. What do you think about Job's wallowing? Are you getting sick of it? Or do you hear him kind of gathering strength again? What's your take on him? Because we've been.
Patty, if I may get personal, I can relate to
Mm,
Job
really?
very well because you know my age, I'm over 100. And when I was younger, I had many problems. And I wondered why they were not eased up. But I think God preparing me for later life so I could meet the challenges ahead of me.
Mm,
And I was able to do that and be successful in what I uh, accomplished. And I think uh, God knows best what is good for us, and we question why he makes so many things difficult for us. But I think he's preparing us for later on in life. That's what I conclude from my life.
that's a
So
power.
I can sympathize with Job because I questioned my pain. And
Mhm.
when I was younger, but I realized I could not have accomplished what I did and have such a wonderful family if
Mhm.
if I uh, did not have the problems I had later and earlier in life.
Mhm. Mhm. So those struggles strengthened you and gave you resolve, perhaps. Is that what I hear you saying? And I think that's just a powerful witness, what you just said, Marietta. And thank you for, I'm glad you got personal. Because really, yes, there's Bible study is interesting intellectually. And, this is where the rubber hits the road, where we can see connections with our own story.
I don't know. I don't see him as gaining strength at this moment in time because when I read the first line about, my spirit's broken, my days are extinct, like my life is over.
Hmm.
He's basically suicidal, waiting for his time. Like he might not want to take his own life, but he's like, I'm ready to go.
But he's
I
pretty
don't
sure
see.
God has taken his life.
Yeah, and I don't see that anybody, I'll still understand that this might be part of your greater plan. I still think he demonstrates that there's faith, like seeking why God is doing what he's doing. But at the same time, I think there's this realization that it's hopeless for him to expect people to act differently. And when he talks about the righteous holding on to their way, like, I think when he's thinking of clean hands, of like, everybody who doesn't want to get involved with me thinks that they're growing stronger by making this sort of, and I've seen this happen, you know, people think that by denouncing something or disassociating with something, their bonds amongst themselves grow stronger, and they're, you know, and they think that their faith is growing stronger. So I feel like, I don't know, I feel like maybe then at the end, then he's like, please, one sensible, you know, I can't find a sensible person amongst you, you know? And my heart no longer, like, I don't desire anything else anymore. I'm ready to go. Like, my days are done.
So
You
you
know,
I see him as kind of saying, you know,
I think he's in despair. I think he's suicidal in as much language as you could use in that, you know, point in time. My days are past. Everything that I had planned for my life, I loved, I served, it didn't matter. Anything that I wanted in my heart is gone. Nobody believes me. And I'm ready for the grave.
Well, that's what he's been doing all along, is
You know?
varying between, I give up, this is ridiculous. There's no place for me to go but die.
Yeah.
And in others of his speeches, he's putting up a little bit of spine and saying, okay, but why am I feeling like this? Why? Somebody tell me, you know, God,
there's a
come down
challenge
now
here,
and I'll talk to your face.
you know, but there's a challenge here too. You know, are you, say your comforters, are you willing to come with me?
Well, that's good.
Yeah. How far are you going to go to comfort me?
You know, will we descend together into the dust? I must go.
All right. Well, I think we all, I'm trying to log on to my other laptop because this one's about out of juice. So this may be a good time to end our conversation. Who's FaceTiming me? Stop.
Okay, well, have a great week, everybody. I will see you Sunday.
You too, Fred.
Fred, you be
Have a good
well.
week.
Bye, Fred.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, Kim. I'm so glad you're here with us.
Yeah, I'm glad. Good topic for me. I mean, yes and no.
Yeah, I hear you. All right, Ray, let's hang on and see if we can squeeze out a couple more minutes of my battery, because Ray and I are going to talk